This is Tea with Botha.
We are again meeting to talk about things that are unconventional, things that are, as I always say, that these are uncharted territory. Today, we again are meeting with a good friend of mine, Ngwaneso, and someone, to be specific, Andile was asking me, one day, you have this peculiar way of referring to each other, Ngwaneso. It's a discussion for another day. I'm with Vusi Mona. And Vusi, thanks for joining us. I know a lot about you, but people out there, they may know because of who you are and the things that you did. Tell us, Vusi, who is Vusi Mona? Where was Vusi Mona born? Vusi is a journalist, is a communicologist. Tell us in more details. How do we work Vusi re bua ka mang? What are you talking about?
Thank you, Ngwaneso. Many people don't know that I'm actually a teacher at heart. People know me as a journalist, as a communicator. That's my public profile. But I started off my working career as a high school teacher, teaching English and economics at a high school in Mpumalanga. I went on to train primary school teachers and secondary school teachers. That's my first passion, teaching. And I guess it's because I'm born of teachers. My dad was a teacher. He transitioned when he was already retired, but he had been a school principal, school inspector. My mom is a school teacher. So that's my first, passion. Born and bred in Mbombela, grew up on the dusty streets of Kanyamazana Township, like any other typical, township boy. Matriculated at a premier high school then called Tembega. And, I was in the township recently, and it broke my heart to see the state of that school, just in terms of physical infrastructure. And the anecdotes I'm hearing about how the culture of teaching and learning has broken down there. But we are products of that high school, Tembega. And, it has produced a lot of prominent alumni, Judge Dunstan Mlambo.
Oh, was he a student there?
He was a student there. And I can mention...
He's am I right? Judge President, Gauteng Division,
yes,
High Court.
Yes, High Court, that's right. And he comes from Barberton in the Lowveld. So that's where I matriculated. And then went to the University of the North, TEFLOP. That's where I trained as a teacher, did a BA in education, majored in English economics and education. Came back, taught at a high school.
In Kanyamazane?
In Kanyamazane. Then went on to be a lecturer at Mgwenya College. Mgwenya College of Education. Elijah Mango College of Education.
Yeah. What were you lecturing on?
It was mainly education and English. And then there came a time in my life when I felt education was not doing it for me. And it was not because of a lack of passion for the profession. In those days, your early 90s, education was a site of struggle. I was young, and the culture of learning and teaching was beginning to break down. Respect for teachers was dissipating. And as a young teacher, I found myself challenged.
Would you say it was as a result of apartheid resistance or?
Well, we had to wage a struggle against apartheid, I would say, in the 80s, my generation, when I was at university. I think in the early 90s, it was symptoms of the struggle against apartheid rather than the struggle against apartheid itself. Remember, during apartheid, we opposed anything that represented authority.
Yeah.
right? And as a teacher, you represented authority. Now, our kids in the townships, Black people in general, were taught to hate anything that represented authority. So as a young teacher, it was difficult to enforce discipline, right? You were seen, however politically progressive you were seen as a reactionary simply because you occupied the position of authority.
You're part of the system.
You're part of the system. And I didn't like being perceived that way. And so I left education, went back to university, went to the University of Cape Town, enrolled for a course in accounting. I didn't finish the course because it was an academically taxing program. After a year, I asked my sponsors, Ernst & Young, firm of chartered accountants, to allow me to come and serve my articles while completing my studies on a part-time basis. And indeed, started my articles in downtown Johannesburg, opposite the then Stock Exchange.
That was in Pritchard Street?
That was in Pritchard Street,
yeah.
Right? Did my articles there. But again, I figured out very quickly that I was not cut out for that profession. Actually, thought I'm too bright to be a chartered accountant.
When they say that chartered accountants are very bright. Yeah.
So I left, and the partners at Ernst & Young were disappointed because I think they had earmarked me as part of the young Black talent that they were grooming to grow the number of chartered accountants in the country because there were very few Black CAs then. But I left for journalism. And
what happened in that transition?
Well, in that transition, I resigned, stayed at home, hustled. We actually started a company with a friend of mine, Mos Mashamete, called Rainbow Communications. And we used to organize conferences. The first conference we pulled off was a big language conference in the city center of Johannesburg. We were young boys. How we managed to invite all these academics and professors, Professor Neville Alexander, Professor Mawasha, they all were guest speakers. And we charged the lecturers and the attendees, made a bit of money as young men. I remember after that conference, I bought myself a Toyota Cash. Right? So that's what happened in that transition. Was sitting at home, started the company. I think we were naive as young men, and we thought, hey, we're going to earn this kind of income on a monthly basis, but business does not run like that. And when the chips were down, that's when I started looking for opportunities in the world of work. Came across this advert in the paper where they were looking for an editor of a newspaper called the Teacher newspaper. It was published by the Mail and Guardian. Now,
was that the SATU, South African Democratic Teachers Union?
It wasn't
their brainchild.
It wasn't really their brainchild, and I'll come to that.
Okay,
this was the brainchild of the Mail and Guardian. With some academics from Wits University, and it was financially backed up by US aid.
Okay.
Those were the brains behind the Teacher newspaper.
Okay.
So I applied to be an editor, which was daring because I had never been a journalist.
No experience, nothing.
No experience. I think
the one experience, it was your English proficiency.
Exactly, right? I think the then editor of the Mail and Guardian, Anton Harbour, must have been fascinated by this daring chap who wanted to be an editor without ever having been a journalist. So they called me in for an interview.
Was it Anton and the other colleague? They were the two founders of the Mail and Guardian, or was it then it a transition that it was only himself?
No. Anton was at the helm. He was the editor, but his colleague Erwin was still there, very much in the background.
Okay.
But Anton was driving the Mail and Guardian. So they called me in for an interview. And I guess because of my teacher activism, I had been a chairman of SATU in the Eastern Transvaal, the then Eastern Transvaal.
In your area, Kanyamazan?
Yes, which is now Mpumalanga. So I convinced them that, look, I know the issues in education. I know the politics of education. I know the practice of education. I'd been a teacher. I had trained teachers. I'd been a teacher activist. So when it came to the issues, I was very clear. And
you understood?
I understood the issues. And I said to Anton, all you need to train me in is how to write and how to edit. But I have a grasp of the issues. And they assigned to me a lady called Barbara Ladman, brilliant, seasoned journalist, to train me. Gave me sort of a crash course over a period of 6 months on the basics of
This is how you write.
This is how you write. This is, how you approach a story. So that's how I came into journalism. And I remember just before our first edition
of the teacher,
Barbara Latman asked me to write my editorial. And I wrote the editorial. Uncharted for me. She looked at the editorial, read it, folded it, threw it in the bin.
But this was somehow rubbish.
And said, honey, this is rubbish. Write me an editorial. And I was offended because I thought, I've got English 3. Who's this woman to tell me I've written nonsense? Right? But I had to be humble and be prepared to learn. That's how I came into journalism.
And when it's journalism, fast forward, after the teacher was the one magazine.
After the teacher newspaper, an opportunity arose for an editorship position at Tribute magazine. I applied for that position. But prior to that, prior to joining Tribute, Tami Mazwai was the publisher of Enterprise magazine. And he had a connection with some professors who were running a press fellowship in the UK through Cambridge University. And Tami would identify local journalists that they would take to Cambridge. He recommended that I be enrolled on that program.
I was
at the teacher then.
Okay.
That was quite an eye-opener. I went to the UK, spent 3 months at Cambridge University. You got given a topic of your choice, of course, to pursue while on that fellowship. And my topic had something to do with the functioning of the British press system. That exposed me to a number of publications in the UK. I visited the Times, I visited the Sun, the Guardian, the Independent. Incidentally, Kaiser Nyansumba was at the Independent then. And I remember
in the UK.
And
he's your homeboy.
He's my homeboy. And I remember going to see him, got a train from Cambridge to London, right? Very enriching program. So I come back after 3 months. Obviously, the Mail and Guardian has certain ambitions around me, but an opportunity arose for me to join Tribute magazine. They were looking for a young black editor. I applied, and the competition was against seasoned black journalists. You know. I remember walking into the waiting area of the interview room, and I looked at all these guys who were waiting to be called in. I mean, I was no match to them in terms of experience in the trade. But I got appointed. Had a stint at Tribute magazine, and I enjoyed myself at Tribute magazine. It was an intellectual site, and one to really marvel at. I used to run the Tribute monthly forums, where we would identify a topic, invite intellectuals, business people, government ministers, and it's a culture that unfortunately has died in the country, we do no longer debate issues. I remember inviting Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, right, to put forward her argument then on why generic medication, right? And the pharmaceutical industry was up in arms about generics, right? Because they were arguing they had put in a lot of money in research, and if we were going to allow generics, we were undermining their commercial interests, right? And
that's a strong lobby.
Very strong lobby. So I was running that.
So Nkosazana has always been, she's among the first people who took the tobacco. So she has always been in the forefront. But also with, as our first Democratic Minister of Health, she took on, there's this, community medicine. For her was that we must focus on your lifestyle diseases.
That's right.
So she has always been, she has always been ahead of her time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I bemoan the fact, that culture has died. Maybe through social media, Facebook, and so on, we still have an opportunity to debate, and indeed we do. But I have my reservations about the depth and the quality of the debate on those platforms. But that's a debate for another day.
Okay.
So I had a stint at the Tribute magazine. Thereafter, I went to City Press.
That's interesting for me.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. That's interesting.
Yes.
You went to City Press. How did you get to City Press? By the way, City Press was known as what one would say, this is your Afrikaner establishment owned by, that's a Naspers.
Yes.
Naspers, they were, these were people that were known to be Afrikaners.
That's right.
Your Kos Becker and...
Exactly. Your Don Vosloo.
Your Don Vosloo, yeah.
Yeah. Look, there was an opportunity for a features editor, right? And I applied for the position. Kulu Sibia was the editor, Kulu. Applied for the position to be features editor. Got called in for an interview. And at the interview, I remember Kulu was taking down notes and he was looking down. And he asked a question. In 5 years' time, young man, where do you see yourself?
Within the organization.
Within the organization in 5 years' time. If you were to get this position, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And he's looking down, he's taking down notes. And I said, I see myself in your position. And he looked up, and I thought I'd stuffed up the interview.
Yeah, because then you're saying, I want to take over.
I want to dislodge you. So he looked up.
I'm going to fire you.
Startled. And he said, repeat that. And I thought, geez, I've really stuffed this thing up. I said, no, now I'm a bit hesitant. I see myself in your position.
Oh, you see myself in your position.
And Putkulu said, I actually like that. I like what you're saying. If you want my position, in 5 years' time, you'll have this position.
And truth be told.
And the
rest came to pass.
The rest is history.
So you're the features editor?
So I became features editor, I think after 2 years. In the newsroom, we used to have pigeonholes. We would pick up our correspondence, pay slips from these pigeonholes. So I'm going home. It's very late in the afternoon, around 6. I see I've got correspondence. I go there, I open it, and Putkulu is still in the office. And here is a letter from Naspers head office in Cape Town saying I've been promoted to be deputy to Putkulu.
Deputy editor.
Deputy editor. I'm hardly 2 years there. Yeah, I'm hardly 2 years. And I panic because there were colleagues who had been there
for much longer.
Much longer than
myself.
Exactly. Colleagues like Charles. May his soul rest in peace. It's actually a homeboy.
Oh, yes.
Charles.
Mulele.
Not Mulele. Charles. But Charlie used to be an organist.
Yeah,
we went to his funeral, you and me.
Yeah, you went to Everton. It was in Everton.
Yes, you and me actually attended this funeral.
Yes, I do.
Yes, Charles, there was Charles Mukhale.
Yes.
There was Braderick Lutai.
These were seasoned veteran journalists. Here's
a young guy, still relatively behind his years and is coming in to be deputy. of this national newspaper. So I panic. I walk into Kulu's office. I said, but Kulu, now, what is this? He said, what? I said, no, this letter. He says, why? Have you got doubts about it? I said, no, I don't think I'm ready for this position. And Butkulu says, but what did you say when we interviewed you?
That 2 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. I see myself in your...
Exactly. So he said, look, it starts here. The path starts here. We're preparing you to take over from me. So stayed with Butkulu as deputy, and he really shielded me. Amongst the people I owe my modest career success, Butkulu I count as one of them. Protected me, guided me, shielded me, because obviously other chaps were not happy that I had gotten the position. And then we moved to a new building.
That's the one, that's the Kingsley Way.
Yes.
The Kingsley Way.
That's right. We moved there, Butkulu is still the editor. And then one day he says to me around lunchtime, he says, let's go and have lunch, you and me. I did not see it coming. This was, a year had not passed since I had been appointed
as a deputy.
Yeah. So he says, let's go to Melville and to have lunch.
Which is just next door.
Exactly. But then he says to me, no, let's not use one car. You'll follow me. He gives me the name of the restaurant. We get there, we have our meal. I did not see it coming. I thought you wanted to ask me how my department is going as deputy, And then Butkulu says, look, I'm ready to step down. And I have told my bosses that you are ready to take over.
As the editor.
As the editor. Right? I was 33 then. When I got the position of editor of a national newspaper, a big national big shoes to fill. Remember, City Press had been edited by the likes of Percy Kobos. I mean, those are icons in black journalism and in journalism generally, dare I say, right?
Big shoes.
Big shoes to fill. Butkulu himself, big shoes to fill.
Indeed.
And even if I were to say so myself, I think I did reposition the paper.
Say more.
I think I did reposition the paper.
Yeah. And say more. What do you mean? What are things that you did that would say, when you look back and say, I did put it in,
the black middle class was just emerging, right? And City Press up
is that
until
during the
then,
time of President Thabo Mbeki?
Yes.
Because he is credited to creating a middle class.
It was during that era. Up until then, City Press had defined itself as the soccer Bible. If you wanted stories on soccer, we were an authority on soccer.
Who was the sports editor then?
Victor Tswai.
Victor Tswai.
Yeah, may his soul rest in peace. Victor Tswai was the sports editor, right? So we were an authority. But when I came in, I thought, look, it's a legacy I will not destroy, but there was this social reality of a black middle class emerging. What were its information needs? These were professionals, these were business people, right? We started searching for stories that would resonate with that class. And I established a business section, City Press Business, right? As an inset. Publishing stories which, as I say, would resonate with that class.
Would be black success.
Black success.
Their challenges. And
exactly. And adapted the tribute forum idea at City Press.
The forum you spoke about.
Yes, the one that we used to run at Tribute.
Yeah.
Introduced a City Press forum, right? And did this in partnership with People's Bank. Lawton Love, the late, was the MD of People's Bank, championed it.
He was also a Black Management Forum
president.
Lawton Love.
That's right.
He's credited to be one of the foremost transformation gurus in the country.
That's right. So I repositioned the paper in that sense. But also when it came to soccer, as I said earlier, I didn't want to kill that tradition. But I thought, and this was after I had had an encounter with Dr. Ivan Khoza,
What was the encounter
The
with Dr. Ivan Koza?
he was in the habit of interacting with us at a senior level, right? But this one day, I think we had upset him about a story that we covered, and it involved his daughter. So he came to the office.
The
late Zoto.
Zoto may have soul rest in peace.
Yes, he came to the office to protest about our coverage, which, with hindsight, I must say, any father would have stood up for his daughter, with that kind of coverage. So he had come to protest. But in the process of the exchange, he then challenges me. He says, and he used to call me Mr. Vusi. So he says, Mr. Vusi, I see you guys characterize yourselves as the soccer Bible. You want to claim that you're an authority on soccer.
This is Dr. Ivan Koza.
This is Dr. Ivan Koza to me.
Yeah. The Juke.
The Juke, the Iron Juke. And he says, well, maybe when it comes to the analysis of the game, who passed the ball to who and who scored how, you guys are an authority. But when it comes to the business of soccer, you know nothing. When it comes to the politics of soccer, you're nowhere near that. So he says, I'm challenging you as the new young editor. If you're going to lay claim on you being an authority, you must start covering the business of soccer, for example. How do we raise sponsorship? Have you ever told your readers how we raise sponsorship with SAP? How do we negotiate broadcasting rights with the SABC and DSTV? Have you ever covered such stories? Right? The boardroom politics, right? And look, we would get gossip about, boardroom politics within the PSL because Putkulu was the chairperson.
Was it with the Supersport?
Supersport,
yes.
Right, the club and this channel, right? But we're not an authority. So it was Ivan who challenged us and who started, investing resources in that direction. So even when it comes to the coverage of soccer, there was a repositioning, right?
Which we
initiated, started covering the issues in soccer, not just who dribbled, who passed through and scored a goal, because soccer is big business. And that's what the Iron Juke challenged us on, to say, this is big business. Will you guys start talking the business of soccer? So there was a repositioning, right? Did I have a successful stint? Yes, up until a certain point. Right?
Is this? Are you talking off the record?
I'm getting there.
Okay,
I'm getting there, right? So one had a successful stint until that episode on Bulelani Nguga allegedly having been a spy. And maybe it is an opportunity to set the record straight, because I don't think that story was told with balance. So I'm on leave that week. I think my sister's mother-in-law or father-in-law had passed on. And I took leave to go and support her and the husband. On a Friday, I get a call from the guys I had left to be in charge. And they tell me about this story that they were working on about Bulelani allegedly having been a spy. So the genesis of the story happened whilst I was not at the office. Friday, if you have an inkling of how the newsroom works, that story is almost done on Friday.
It's almost done on Friday.
Done on Friday.
It's interesting, yeah.
Right? So I then decide, man, this is an explosive story.
They're saying to you that, look, what are they saying to you? That, look,
we're publishing, we're going ahead.
But they're saying that there's a story that alleges that Bulelani Nguga is a spy.
Yes, right? Now, I understand as an editor.
And this is the then he was the director of the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA.
Correct. Understanding this is explosive, I then say to the chaps, look, I'm going to attend the funeral in the morning. Shortly thereafter, though I'm on leave, I'll come to the office.
On Friday?
Yeah. It's on Friday, I say I'll attend the funeral of my relatives on Saturday morning. Shortly thereafter, I'll come to the office. I'll bring in our lawyers to have a look at the story. They'll advise us, right? And when a lawyer was daring, Sam Noval, he has since passed on. And indeed, I went to the office, got to understand the context. How did this story come about? Some sources had come to them. I said, okay, Sam, have a look at the story, from a legal point of view. Are we going to be in trouble? Now he was a daring chap.
He was?
He was. He was not a conservative lawyer. He was the sort of lawyer who will say, publish and be damned.
We're taking our chances here.
Taking our chances. But of course, he would make sure that you can't.
He's not reckless.
Yeah, he's not reckless. So he looked at the story, said, we can get away with it. In our headline, let's ask the question.
That's him now.
Yes. So we don't say
Bulelani is a spy.
Bulelani is a spy. So the headline said, was Bulelani a spy? That was the headline. Was Bulelani a spy? Right. So that if we were ever to be taken to court,
you're not saying he's a spy.
He could argue that. That's the question we asked. We never said he's a spy. Right. Of course, that story upset a lot of people. Right. A lot of people were up in arms, including people in journalism. People said, how dare...
Your colleagues.
My colleagues, right? Rival newspapers.
Yeah.
President Thabo Mbeki decides he's going to establish a commission of inquiry.
The Heifer Commission.
The Heifer Commission.
The Heifer Commission.
Right?
This is a retired judge.
Yes, a retired judge, a retired apartheid judge, I must emphasize. Establish a commission of inquiry. The thinking in journalism was we are not going to cooperate. As journalists, we're not going to cooperate with this commission. I dissented and said, no, if I've published the story, I'm the editor, I must take responsibility. So I'll go to the commission to explain to the judge how the story came about, right? The rest is history.
And in that time, President Zuma, there was about to be this conference out in Limpopo.
Yes.
And was it that time? He is not the president of... am I right? He's not the president of the SC then.
Yes, it's not. It's the deputy president.
The deputy president.
So all of these is happening in the context of that tussle. The perception that Zuma is being persecuted politically because there are people who are blocking his way.
Was it? Were you accused of? Were you accused that you are what? Then there was a language. You are in whose camp and what? What
exactly?
Was? Yeah.
I think.
This is the Zuma man.
Yes, the story got people to conclude that, City Press is going for Bulelani because Bulelani is prosecuting Zuma and Vusi is protecting Zuma.
You haven't spoken about the off the record.
I'll come to the off the record.
Okay.
I'll come to the off the record. So a commission of inquiry is established, and it which came first? Was it the off the record? No.
Or was it...
Actually, the off the record came before then.
Yeah.
Before
but what led to the heifer? What
led to the heifer is the story in City Press. Right?
Because this was international, national,
Yes.
It caused ructions.
Exactly. So the terms of reference for the judge were for him to determine is there truth in this allegation.
That Bulelani Ngcuka was a spy.
Was a spy, right? But prior to that, Bulelani Ngcuka had called an off-the-record briefing with editors. And I was part of that.
Can I add or ask, was it black editors only?
It was black editors only.
So there were other editors who were white?
Who were not called to that meeting.
But who were white?
Who were white?
Indian, white, colored
yes, were
Indian?
not invited. It was
African editors who were called to the off the record
by
Bulelani Ngcuka.
Yes, right. Where he basically said look, Zuma is corrupt and is going to get charged. And this is off the record, of course. But I think, and I stand by it, I think he went beyond the principles of off the record. I think he started getting personal and smearing the guy and basically coming across as saying, as director of the NPA, I've concluded that he's guilty. Now, that's the role of a judge. That's not the role of a prosecutor, right?
Yours is to bring the case to court.
The case to court, right? And I broke ranks with that gathering. I'm the one who actually disclosed what transpired there, much to the chagrin of fellow editors, because they felt I was breaching the off-the-record principles. You don't disclose what happened during an off-the-record briefing. But my argument was, if there's slander there, you can't be absolute about that principle. And I made the example. If I get called to an off-the-record principle and I get told, listen, today we're robbing that bank or we're committing this crime, it's off the record. What are my obligations? Am I going to respect the off-the-record principle?
It's a responsible citizen of the country.
Exactly. So, that principle is not absolute, and I still stand by that assertion.
So when you look back,
yes,
how you're condemned, how you're vilified, you have the view that I took a right decision.
I stand by
you
that.
Stand by that.
I stand by that, right? But of course, that alienated me from fellow editors and fellow journalists.
And how did that make you feel?
Initially, when you're isolated.
You're the black sheep of
yes, you become the black sheep. Right?
Of the journalistic...
Exactly. So you walk into a social setup gathering and you get a sense these chaps don't trust me and they don't want to interact with me.
They loathe me.
Exactly, right? I quickly jumped to where we are now. The irony is quite a number of my colleagues there do work for me now at SANRAL as consultants.
Life.
Because the media has shrunk. Many have lost their jobs. And even if I were to say so myself, I think I've created a livelihood for them. And I'm bigger than personal grudges.
Forgive and forget.
Another person would have said, look, I've got nothing that I owe you guys. You go and seek elsewhere.
But before we, and this is important, but when Vusi, there was then there's a new government.
Yes.
President Zuma is the president.
Yes.
And you get appointed as the Deputy Director General.
Yes.
Communications and?
Yes.
And communications in the presidency.
In the presidency.
Or what would be your thinking that, this was a payback? Zuma was saying, look, he stood by me. He chose the camp.
Yeah.
Those that would want to accuse you.
Yes.
He chose this camp. These journalists, others would say, he sold out.
Yeah.
And so they are rewarding him. Yes. They are paying him back.
Yes.
This is our Judas Iscariot.
Yeah.
Well, what is your response?
It would be a fair comment or conclusion, right? I wouldn't blame people who would conclude that way. But then I would say, paying back because I have no skill to do the job. This was not a blind deployment, as it were, right? I think that administration went for someone that they thought could do the job, would rise to the occasion and meet the demands. So, one was not, taken from the streets to come and head comms at the presidency because one had a blind loyalty to Zuma.
And what was your relationship with, remember that you were, if you you were outside.
Right.
You were holding leaders, or you were saying to the presidents, you were saying to the ministers, running this newspaper. Now you are now. You're having to defend.
Yeah.
You're having to defend.
Yeah.
You're having to. One would say a year ago, 2 years ago,
Yes.
you would be in the forefront and say, but of the criticisms, holding them accountable. You're called the watchdog.
But I want to challenge exactly that.
Okay.
You see, I did not have a problem working for government as head of comms in the presidency or even at GCIS. Right?
That's where you moved from the presidency.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because my understanding of journalism was different from the existing narrative. I did not see myself as a watchdog. I was a purveyor of information, right? The mistake that the fourth estate often makes.
By the way, the fourth estate, that's the media.
That's the media.
Yeah.
Is this overrating of ourselves without being voted by anybody as representing the interests of the people. Now, that violates my own understanding of journalism. So
you're putting yourself somewhere there. That's what
exactly,
you're saying. Yeah.
You know,
in this pedestal. Yeah.
So I didn't have a problem crossing over because my conception, I never saw myself as the opposition.
So would you say that most journalists would look at themselves as
the opposition?
Not as people who would report, who would educate.
Exactly.
As opposition.
So
they play opposition.
You would have a problem crossing over if you had seen yourself as opposition. If you want to be opposition, go and contest the elections. And go to parliament.
Be independent or become a political party.
That's not the role of journalists. And that's what I have a problem with how journalism is practiced in South Africa.
Today.
And since then, where we see ourselves and define ourselves, right, as opposition to government. Journalism is broader than that. When there is an old woman of Imvaba who wants to know how to access a social grant, if your framework is that I'm opposition, how are you going to service that woman? Isn't it your role as a journalist to dig and mine that information and make it available to this citizen so that she can function effectively in a democracy?
That goal.
Yes. Right? So I've often come across this question. You were on the other side. Now, what side are you talking about? It's never on the other side. It's never John Steenhuisen. It's never Julius Malema. Those are on the other side.
Yeah.
I was a journalist reporting objectively to the best of my ability. So I've never had a problem of, I was on the other side, now you're on the other side.
So it has never been an issue with you.
It's never been an issue.
There's never been an issue with you.
And I say so, Juanis, because even as I was heading comms in the presidency, I spoke my mind. Right? If
you never told the lie.
I never told the lie. In fact, some might say I was removed from head of presidency comms to GCIS because I did not tell the lie.
By the way, you went to GCIS.
So how would you define me then? Was I opposition to union buildings?
Maverick,
maybe. Yeah. Right? So, the narrative, I think we need to redefine journalism. I see it broader than being a watchdog. Right?
Why one is you seem to have difficulties? Why? Watchdog. What conjures up in your mind about watchdog? Is it something that
you know where watchdogs stay in a typical household? At the door, at the gate. They never come inside the house. Right?
So then they watch there. That's their role.
That's their role.
Outside.
Yeah.
At the door.
Watchdogs look after the master. So if you probe this concept deeper, it can take you to very treacherous waters. You are a watchdog watching for who? Who's the master? Because if I have a watchdog at my house, I'm the master. So
and this dog or this watch, it depends on you.
Yes, exactly. Right? So, is society the master of these watchdogs? Is capital the master of this watchdog? Are media owners the master of this watchdog?
He who pays the piper calls the tune.
So it can take you to very controversial areas, the concept of a watchdog.
Do you think that presently the media is struggling to define its role? Or is the media succeeding in defining its role?
I think the media is battling to define its role. And the manifestation of that is the shrinking role, size, and influence of the media.
Is it because it's shrinking? Is it because some argue generalization of the media, or is it because that you have other avenues? People are no longer depending on your traditional media. You have your X, which was your Twitter. You have your Facebook. You have you have your Twitter, which I spoke you have to TikTok, where people will say, "Look, I'm in control. I'm in charge." Is it because of those things that you say, "Look, the media is dwindling and it may die a natural death," or is there a future? There's, I don't have to buy. I can read online. I can do all of this.
It's a variety of factors, right? It's not this or that.
Okay.
It's a conglomeration of factors which have resulted in the media losing its influence. Look at the exercise you and me are engaged in now. It's not the SABC. It's alternative media, what we are doing, right?
And people argue that this is the way to go.
Exactly, right? Yes, you may have X, you may have Facebook, but if the media had made itself indispensable, I don't care how many alternative platforms would have come, right? I would still look forward to that brilliant analysis that is objective, that's top quality in the City Press or in the Sunday Times. If not in print, digitally, right? I must be able to access and read, right? So it's a lot of factors. You've alluded to generalization, but before we even come to generalization, I think there's deep issues. Ideology. Once the media defines itself as belonging to a particular ideological corner, right? You are restricting yourself. You are limiting your influence. You are cutting out certain people.
You're suffocating yourself.
You're suffocating yourself, right? Because then there are people who will not pick up this newspaper because it is predictable. It has defined itself as right-wing or left-wing or whatever, right? Or pro this party or anti this party, right? So that's the fundamental issue. I see generalization, I see the emergence of digital and alternative media. They have contributed. But in a particular environment, right, it's the media pigeonholing itself in terms of ideology and therefore losing public trust.
Is it not that? Is it because one is so he who pays the piper calls the tune?
Yes.
Is it? Oh, you'd say that capitalism plays a greater role.
It does.
If you don't toe the line,
yes.
In ideologically speaking, if
yes.
this is what we want to, this is where we're going, this is how we're going, and you, because we pay your salary, you can't dissent.
Yes.
You can't have, so the question of independence, is a myth.
No, it is a myth. In this country, let's not pretend. There are certain, as an example, political figures that are darlings of the media. There are certain political players that are just seen as rogues by the media. And they don't have to do anything. The media is justifying them as rogues. So where's independence there?
So you can't, if these certain individuals, they whether their policies, their thinking, they would not be questioned because there's this predetermined that these are in fact holy cows.
You can't touch them.
Who do you say that this is good for our democracy? Is this, I mean, we're talking few days would have after 30 years of our democracy, one of the defining elections. Who do you say one is for that? All of this, given all of this, we're in trouble, especially with the media that has, you're saying that is ideologically, positioned in a particular way, that we are we in trouble or no, we are not in trouble? In fact, our democracy, who do you say it's in safe hands?
We are not in trouble. My hope is it's citizen journalism. We are not in trouble. My hope is in alternative media, right? We are not in trouble because people have taken the responsibility to tell their stories and to disseminate their stories, right? We are no longer captured by capital and the way capital defines the role of the media. So people can come up with an alternative view, which may not find expression in mainstream or conventional media. We are not in trouble because conventional media has lost its influence. I mean, I was looking at the circulation of newspapers. They've bled in the last 10 years.
And why?
One is the emergence of alternative media, social media, right? But at the core, right? If the public still trusted the media, they would still consume. So there's the issue of trust. Yes, they may not be consuming print, conventional, but they'll go online, right? And consume some of our conventional newspapers online.
And that's not happening.
That's not happening.
You're saying because you have a more conscious citizenry that says, look, you can't tell me who to vote for. You can't want me or force me to align to your ideology.
And it's good for our democracy. So our democracy is in safe hands.
Because there would be instances where particular newspapers, magazines would say, look, I remember many years ago at the emergence of UDM, then they would say, I mean, Peter Bruce, he would say that, look, I'm going to urge South Africans to vote for UDM.
Yes. Let's look at Malema. Just as a political phenomenon, or the EFF as a political phenomenon. If ordinary citizens believe the narrative that we saw forming when the EFF came onto the political scene, the EFF would not be where it is today.
Yeah, the notion, because was that, look, that the sky is going to fall.
Exactly.
Yeah, this country is going to burn.
Exactly.
In fact, if you say this, Julius Malema, there are two people, in fact, that it is former President Zuma and Julius Malema, who, I mean, are leading in terms of people saying we want them to be our president. Whether one would argue it's scientific, not scientific. But
exactly.
Yeah.
Whether a dominant newspaper likes it or not, the citizens are saying that.
And what you are saying is that, so that loss of trust translates into a citizen saying that we will, if you like, we're in charge of our destiny.
People are making up their minds.
This is us. So the media would not be like, look, we want you to vote for X, Y.
Yeah, people are not waiting for Vusi Mona as an editor to write an editorial opinion.
Condemning,
for them, to then decide, do I like the EFF or not?
Or because based on this editorial, which demonizes, or this editorial which is more liberal, that we want you to go this direction. We want you to. You're saying that people are saying we're more wiser.
People are much wiser today. There's a plethora of platforms. So access to information, it's at the fingertips of people.
So people don't rely on your traditional newspaper, your traditional, the newsroom.
And they may read, right? They may still read what a typical newspaper has published, but that reading is not happening in the context of what I would call a blank mind, a tabula rasa. That's blank.
That you can write anything
on top, right? Yeah. People would have read something on X, people would have read something on social media, they would have, right? And then they come across this editorial opinion, right? And it is mirrored, that opinion, against what they already know.
So people say that, look, this is what you think of this party, but you will not determine, you will not tell me, you will not dictate to me.
Because I know better. I've been on the website of this political party.
Well, when you say this one, does that speaks to your urban, rural, or you're saying it affects both your rural, because there's also an argument that your established political parties, there's this urban and rural divide that, it's your elites who are in Gauteng, who are in your metropolitan areas, they would be reached by, they would have access to all of this. By the way, the Gogo you spoke to, still listen to Muganonene, still listen to Parafala. Can't read or has no access to data. Relies on the 350 on SASA. Sometimes it comes, sometimes doesn't come. And so, are you saying that traditional media? I mean, she actually thinks that, look, when Lesedi is there, this is my world. So are you saying that that in fact it does not matter whether it's rural, urban?
Look, that divide is there. You can't wish it away. The urban-rural divide. But I think when it comes to politics or the advancement of social media, it is overemphasized. And I'll tell you why I say so.
Okay.
I mean, stats tells us internet penetration in this country is 70% upward, right? You look at who are the people who are transacting using their cell phones. People in rural areas, they're transacting through cell phones. So this notion that the rural have been cut off from digital media, I think it is overstated. There may be some truths here and there, but these people get their SASA grants and they are transacting here. Right?
So it's not true that they
have been completely cut off. And I think political parties that understand that are using the power of social media to reach to those people. Yes, they may still have to make a choice between buying data and a loaf of bread. That's the reality of poverty in South Africa. But let's be careful that we don't overemphasize or impose what we wish to be true. People in rural areas are communicating through cell phones.
So it's you're saying that they are not left behind.
They're not left behind.
So you will not, when it's what you're saying is that you will not impose your views on them and think that they have no clue what's happening in the country.
Exactly.
So they are on the ball. They understand.
Yes.
And so it's on the basis of that you're saying, look, our democracy is in safe hands.
Our democracy is in safe hands. We've, ever since the inception of our democracy, we've always had free and fair elections. I've had people predicting doom and gloom for these coming elections. And I think South Africans are going to shock those prophets of doom and gloom. Our democracy is mature.
So you think do you still have those prophets of doom? I mean, I remember 94, but
Yes.
would you say 30 years, you still have the same?
You do.
You still do?
You do.
Are there people who are not believing that we've matured as a democracy?
Yeah, it's wishful thinking, and it's stereotypes about an African country and about Africans, right? If Zuma's party doesn't win, then there's going to be chaos. And I've heard people even from inside Zuma's party saying that. I think South Africans are more sophisticated than that. South Africans understand that if this thing goes up in smoke, we are all in trouble.
Yeah. In fact, or in fairness, that, I mean, you would have people from the MK party you're talking about who would say that, look, anybody who calls for violence does not represent us.
Exactly.
I mean, they would say that, look, we've taken action against Reddy, we've taken action against the young man who's the president of the MK. So even within the party has said officially that, look, this is not our policy,
Yes.
this is not violence.
Yes.
So we are... we are in safe hands.
We are in safe hands.
You'd say this because we know better.
We know better.
Which also brings me to something else that you must be relieved that now you're working for SANRAL.
Yes.
You must be relieved that the toll gates could soon be a thing of the past.
Right.
Which has been a hot potato.
Yes.
And which in some instances would have been used by other political parties for their political ends.
Correct. And they have in the past, successfully so, in Gauteng.
On the toll gates.
Yes, the toll gantries. The toll gates will still remain, right? Because there's a difference between the gantries and your conventional toll plazas. So your conventional toll plazas where you come to a toll plaza and the gate opens and you pay, and that remains. What is going is the gantries in Gauteng. The 201 kilometers along the Gauteng road network. That's what's going to be switched off in a few days' time. And we are relieved. As SANRAL, now talking as a spokesperson of SANRAL.
That's a hot potato.
We are relieved at many levels, apart from the fact that it was causing a lot of social consternation, social tension, which is never desirable. Financially, it did put SANRAL in a very awkward position, right? And what do I mean by that? You have a debt that we raised in order to improve the Gauteng road network
as
SANRAL. We went to the capital markets, we borrowed billions of rands, right? So we owe the capital markets. And then we've got motorists who are not paying, right? They owe us billions of rands, right?
That's what's going to happen. Is that going to be write-off?
I'll come to that.
Okay.
Now, you've got these two debts. You got to repay the capital markets, and Vusi hasn't paid, and you need to go to the market to raise money. Which institution is going to give you money? And that impacts service delivery. So there are certain roads we can't develop because the markets are hesitant to give us money because there's this albatross
in your
around
neck.
our
neck.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you can't build these roads, it impacts citizens. I mean, I was driving from Pretoria on Friday. I got shocked from Pretoria to Joburg. We're going back to the congestion of 2005, 2006. The gridlock on the highway. We are choking economic development. You choke the economy of Gauteng, the economy of South Africa is in trouble. If goods can't move, if people can't move, goods can't get to market, we are choking economic development, right? So this has been resolved. Gauteng is going to pay 30% of our debt.
Okay.
Right, to the capital markets.
Okay.
Treasury is going to take 70%.
Okay.
What does that mean? Our balance sheet is clean all of a sudden. It's like me, Wanesu, coming now and saying, on your bond, I'm going to pay off your bond. Your credit worthiness immediately increases, isn't it? You don't have a debt.
Because I own this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what has happened in a simple man's
layman's language.
Language, right? The albatross has been removed. Our balance sheet is light. We can go and raise capital. What about the guys who owe SANRAL, the motorists who owe SANRAL? Some were paying, some weren't paying. And the debt runs into billions of rands, right? Is it going to be written off? That's not something I can answer, right? It's a policy decision.
Policy and political decision.
It's a policy and political decision, indeed. Because when the scheme was in operation, it was legal, it was lawful. So the technical answer is that those who owe must pay. And there are regulations which we did not put in place. They were put by Treasury and voted by Parliament. Right? Regulations that say this is how you deal with debt. So as an institution, my accounting officer, my CEO, has a legal obligation to collect what is owed to the state. That's what the law says.
Yeah. So suddenly when it's all of these, and we're going to the votes. Is this what one would call political expediency? Is this decision that, look, we need votes. Look, it has been a bugbear in Gauteng. Some argue that, in fact, Gauteng, the recent elections, the ruling party was bleeding. Is there something correct that, in fact, this is a political expedient? It has nothing to do with the economics you spoke about. That look, you have to, as you take this decision, you have to bear in mind that what are the economic consequences, but also other than that, you have to bear in mind that the service delivery you're talking about. So would you agree to those that are, in fact, who are cynics and say, but look, hold on, we can sit through this.
Yeah.
Hold on. On the smooth scanners, hold on, but Dunje, this is, you are coming with this decision because you are actually saying that we want you to vote for us.
I think it would be too simplistic an analysis to make that conclusion, because the question I would then ask is, a few years ago when there were no elections in sight and Makura
then the premier,
put together an inquiry into e-tolls, which was chaired by Professor Nkondo. Danisa Baloyi was sitting there. Patricia Honeycomb, Tricia, was sitting there. A lot of prominent people to investigate the desirability of e-tolls. Was that political expediency? So there was a desire to resolve the problem. When the president put together a 3-member panel made up of the Minister of Finance, Minister of Transport, Premier of Gauteng, to find a solution to this, when there were no elections in sight, was that political expediency? The reality one is it's never desirable to have social tension, which can be avoided, right? Where I would agree with you is it was a political decision. I mean, the president didn't put together a team of academics to find a solution. He put together 3 politicians, Minister of Transport, Minister of Finance, Premier Gauteng, and said, you resolve this and come back with recommendations at cabinet. So, nothing wrong with it being a political decision, but politicians are there to find solutions.
So nothing sinister.
Nothing sinister, right? Because if you are going to prolong this thing, then we are exposing one of your best performing state-owned institutions.
Which is SANRAL.
Even if I have to say so myself.
Because you are the spokesperson.
Because you are saying
they say you can't bite the hand that beat you.
The debt must continue. Right? The capital markets are not going to touch your institution. How then do you deliver roads? Especially when citizens, when they're around the country, are saying, can you give some of these roads to SANRAL?
Because of your history of excellent roads and
And we are getting a number of roads transferred to us. from the provinces. When I joined SANRAL, we're responsible for about, I think, 17,000 kilometers of roads. 10 years later, we're responsible for about 24,000 kilometers of roads. We're getting these transfers, right, from the provinces. So, do you let your best performing entity continue bleeding financially, unable to raise capital, but citizens are saying, give them more roads? How are we going to execute? So that's the reality. And a political decision had to be made. Right?
So this was, even those who argue it was political expediency, but it was informed by the realities, practical realities.
And surely, here's the irony. Some who are saying it's political expediency are the very ones who are saying, give these roads to SANRAL.
Because they've proven, they have a track record.
Yes. Some of those who are saying it's political expediency are very keen to give their roads to this institution.
So you'd say that, look, as you said, it would be a shallow, it would be less informed, uninformed to accused, because, in fact, there are benefits to resolving this, both for social cohesion, both for political stability, economic, Because if you look at what's happening, look at, look at what's happening with Transnet. Look at the Richards Bay. All of this. Look at the problems there. Look at the accidents that are happening on, roads that are not well developed. So you're saying all of these things have to be taken into consideration to ensure that a SANRAL does not find itself into the same position that where Transnet is at the moment.
Exactly.
Trans is supposed to be the backbone of this economy. In the same way that you are not only about roads. You also about ensuring that we develop this country, we ensure that there's economic improvement, and so you are integral. So is SANRAL.
Yeah. In fact, just on SANRAL, to give you the context and the significance of the role we play and why a resolution had to be found to this. We're responsible for 24,000 kilometers in a country that has 750,000 kilometers of roads. So we make up only 4% of the network, the road network of South Africa. But
only 4%?
Only 4%. But here's what's interesting. We carry 70% of the freight that moves on the roads of this country. 70%.
I thought it was the other way. I thought it would have been Transnet.
No. The reason you have trucks, so many trucks on our roads, is because the rail system is failing.
It has actually collapsed here.
Exactly. I drove to Mozambique with my wife the other day, 20 kilometers to the border, to Libombo. The trucks were queuing on a national road. Right? So if 70% of the freight moves on SANRAL's network, you kill SANRAL, this country comes to a standstill.
70%.
70% of freight. Cars that are coming from the harbor, stuff that we're importing that comes through the harbors, it moves on the network, right, of SANRAL. 40% of vehicle traffic, 40% of vehicle traffic annually moves on our network. Now, would you let a crisis SANRAL is facing to be prolonged? What are the economic implications, right? There's 28 road projects that we could not...
28.
That we could not execute because this thing has not been resolved. Now, when you translate that into money, it's worth billions of rands. Go and tell the construction industry that, no, this is political expediency, we shouldn't resolve it. They're going to tell you, you're going to kill the construction industry. They need those 28 projects to be unlocked so that they can create jobs, they can invest, and that's multi-billion.
Which also, when you talk about the construction industry, the construction mafia. What do you think?
As SANRAL, we're very careful about that concept, construction mafia. We don't want to...
Carefully, does it exist? It doesn't exist. It's just a figmentation. Is it a political, someone is using it? And is that where SANRAL position is?
There are people who are disrupting, right? The construction industry. And there are people who go to sites and demand monies and what have you. That's the reality. Are they a mafia? I'll be careful about that, right? People do things out of desperation, lack of opportunities, lack of access to opportunities, but to then characterize them as a mafia, I personally have reservations.
It will be taking it too far.
I think so.
So
I think there's other mafias in this country that we don't want to talk about.
Interesting. What are those? This is
very sophisticated mafias. This is that we don't want to talk about. But when poor people go on site out of desperation and say we're demanding XYZ, we characterize
give us
them.
10%, give us 5%.
We characterize them as a mafia. Well, some other day we must talk about the sophisticated mafias in this country.
It's a debate for another day. So you are convinced that with all of these things that come May 29, what you are doing now, SANRAL, the economy, and all of this put together, that there's nothing to worry about the 29th. And how the media would I sit here and think that, look, I can sleep peacefully at night to know that on the 29th, the media would report without fear, without favor?
The media will do its best. Will they be perfect?
Bear in mind, you spoke about the ideology and
they will do their best.
Your own misgivings about them.
Within the constraints that they are facing. They are dying. There's no resources. There's generalization of stuff. So there's lots of limitations that the media is facing. They're not going to give us the best analysis. Best brains have retired and died, right? So they'll do their best within very obvious limitations, right? These junior guys are going to try and do an analysis and they're going to stuff up, right? Not for lack of trying, but because of lack of experience, right? And the resource constraints that they're facing. During our days, I would give a journalist a car on a Friday and they go and look for stories. They come back on Tuesday. They've kept the car the whole weekend. I don't think that's happening today. I don't think the media can afford those kinds of luxuries today. So there are real limitations and restrictions that the media is facing. They're going to try and give us the best that they can. But as I said earlier on this, I'm having confidence in other sources of information. So I'm not worried about the elections, right? In fact, I think at a citizen level, we shouldn't be worried, right? The people who should be worried are the political parties.
Are the political parties?
Will we come back? Will we go in, right? So let's not mistaken the anxiety of politicians for the anxiety of citizens.
And project it on citizens.
So
are you saying citizens are okay, are relaxed, they know, they understand?
They understand.
Community media, are we doing enough? Are we putting resources? I mean, are we, you from Kanyamazani. Is there a community radio station Kanyamazani?
There used to be, but it has collapsed.
Just collapsed, yeah. Mulechi and your Soshanguve, the what? So we're not, and who do not say that, especially now going to the elections? Here are, someone who would be there in Mulechi, community radio would play a pivotal role. Are we investing? Are we not? I'm just saying that as where IEC would in fact invest resources in those communities to ensure that there's voter education. I sit here, I don't think that we're doing enough in terms of voter education and using this community radio stations would for me an ideal, because then you're talking to people who on the ground, who would be your Ngwaneso at the coal phase of all of these challenges? Are we doing? I mean, I know that government has got, is it the
MDDA.
MDDA. I'm not sure. What's your take?
Yeah.
Vis-a-vis the elections and.
We are not, right? Straightforward answer. When it comes to community media as a country, and I'm very passionate about that subject, we're not investing enough in community media and what I generally call development communication.
Development communication.
But even so, you listen to colleagues like Kate at the IEC and other colleagues there, they will tell you this election is one where they've had the highest youth voter turnout in the face of shrinking commercial media. Where do these young people get the information from? Alternative media, social media platforms.
They're online,
right?
They're on TikTok.
Exactly. So yes, we bemoan the lack of investment in community media. I heard the other day that Vusi GCI's publication, which I had the privilege of taking to another level when I was at GCIS in terms of increasing its print run and its frequency. Government is doing away with that. And my heart bled.
Sad,
because that is part of development communication.
And that was free, am I right?
It was free. In a country like South Africa, development communication is not a poor cousin of communication. Development communication is the real deal.
But we're looking down upon it.
And we're looking down upon it. So as government, we should be putting more resources in community.
Vusi
community platforms, the alternative stuff that you guys are doing. That's the real deal. Community TV stations. That's where we should be pumping our money, right? And I can tell you where I work, I insist that 30% of my budget goes to community media. And my service providers understand that, and they sometimes exceed that target. They hit 35, 36, up to 40%.
Because you understand that mother you spoke about at Kofimbaba must actually have access that, look, this is what SANRAL is building.
Exactly.
We're building this, and these are the economical benefits for you in Kofimbaba,
yes,
for you when you are in Mulechi. So you understand the importance and the potency of community
media. We've got to be investing. And I think the administration that had a grasp of this is Thabo Mbeki's administration. Iso Pahad, may his soul rest in peace. I think they understood the importance of community media. I don't think subsequent administration...
That includes the one that you served.
Exactly. Have understood the power of community media. As I say, in a country like South Africa where literacy levels are low, right, you don't have as sophisticated audiences as the Western audiences, you have to invest in community media. So I would agree, we're not doing enough.
Well, Tea with Botha, we're coming to the end of it. Another episode, interesting, invigorating, no holds barred, but I also think unconventional. And Vusi, thank you, Ngwaneso, for gracing us and sharing with us some of these. I sit here and we end this, that in fact we are, you have said to me and you have brought back, I am optimistic that this democracy, this vote is in fact in safe hands. And now I remember what Julius Malema had said, that we should not condemn the IEC because his view was that this is an important institution that must be supported, must be protected, must be promoted. So, you leaving me with, I am optimistic that we're in safe hands, and the media, with all the limited resources, will play a critical role in ensuring that it brings us free and fair, authentic.
Zimbabwe at 20 the wheels started coming off.
At 20?
At 20, the wheels started coming off. We approaching 30 years. It's imperfect. We have our own challenges. There's no violence in this country. There's no one who's gotten detained because they criticize Cyril Ramaphosa. you know.
Once again, Ngwaneso, thank you so much. This democracy is in safe hands, and all the institutions that are going to make sure that this elections on the 29th of May happen, we should support them, we should protect them from undue criticisms. Once again,
Thank you, Ngwaneso.
Thank you, man.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
This is Tea with Botha.